Daniel Reeves stared at the leather portfolio his fiancée had just slid across the restaurant table. Inside was a prenuptial agreement, 47 pages of legal terminology that Lauren expected him to sign in 72 hours. Their wedding was Saturday. Today was Wednesday. "It's just a formality," Lauren said, her voice casual as she sipped her martini. "My father insists. You understand." Daniel did understand. He understood that Lauren's family saw him as a project manager from Ohio who'd gotten lucky landing a girl from Connecticut's Gold Coast. He understood that her father, Richard Ashford III, viewed their marriage as a potential liability to the Ashford family fortune. What Lauren and her father didn't understand was that Daniel's best friend from college was Tyler Chen, one of Chicago's most respected family law attorneys, and Tyler had written every word of the document Lauren was asking him to sign. "Of course," Daniel said, closing the portfolio without reading a word. "I'll review it tonight." Lauren's smile was radiant with relief. "You're amazing. I knew you'd understand. Daddy will be so pleased." She reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "This doesn't change anything between us. It's just paperwork." Daniel squeezed back, his mind already 3 moves ahead. He'd spent the last month watching Lauren transform from his loving girlfriend into someone he barely recognized. And now, sitting in Gibson's steakhouse with a prenup designed to leave him with nothing, he was about to show her exactly who she'd underestimated. Before we continue with Daniel's story, hit that subscribe button, like the video if you're excited for what's coming next, and leave a comment, letting me know where you're watching from. Is it New York, Miami, or Chicago? Now let's get back to Daniel and discover how a prenup meant to protect one family ended up exposing everything they'd tried to hide. Daniel had met Lauren Ashford 18 months earlier at a tech conference in Boston. She'd been there representing her family's investment firm, Ashford Capital Management, scoping out startups for potential acquisition. He'd been presenting on project management methodologies for scaling operations in high-growth environments. After his panel, she'd approached him with questions that demonstrated genuine understanding of the complexity he'd been discussing. "Most people don't grasp that scaling isn't just about adding resources," she'd said, her green eyes bright with intelligence. "It's about systematic thinking and anticipating bottlenecks before they become catastrophic." They'd gone for coffee that stretched into dinner. Lauren was 28, Harvard Business School educated, articulate about market dynamics and investment strategies. Daniel, 31, had worked his way through Ohio State while holding down 2 jobs, then climbed from junior analyst to senior project manager at a logistics company through sheer competence and strategic thinking. Lauren found his Midwest work ethic refreshing. Daniel found her confidence and sophistication magnetic. Within 3 months, they were splitting time between his apartment in Chicago and her condo in Greenwich, Connecticut. Within 6 months, they'd moved in together in Chicago's River North neighborhood. Within a year, Daniel had proposed on a weekend trip to Napa Valley. Lauren's family had been cautious. Her father, Richard Ashford III, had built Ashford Capital from a small family office into a firm managing $2.3 billion in assets. He'd done it through calculated risk-taking and, according to Lauren, an almost pathological distrust of anyone outside the old money Connecticut circle. Her mother, Patricia, was equally concerned but more subtle about it, asking pointed questions about Daniel's family background and long-term financial planning. Lauren's brother, Blake, a hedge fund manager in Manhattan, had been openly dismissive. "You're marrying a project manager," he'd said during their first family dinner, his tone suggesting Daniel had admitted to being a janitor. "That's very noble of you, Lauren." But Lauren had defended him. "Daniel's brilliant. He's methodical, strategic, and he actually builds things instead of just moving money around and pretending it's productive." Blake had laughed, but the warmth had drained from the evening. The first real warning sign came 3 months before the wedding. Daniel had been promoted to director of operations at his company, a significant jump that came with substantial responsibility and a salary that pushed him into the low 6 figures. He'd come home excited to share the news with Lauren. "That's wonderful," she'd said, barely looking up from her laptop. "What's the equity package?" There isn't one. I'm not at the executive level yet. Lauren had made a small noise in the back of her throat. So you're still working for a salary. No ownership stake. No real leverage. I'm directing operations for a company that does $400 million in annual revenue. It's significant responsibility. But you're still an employee, Daniel. You're still trading time for money instead of building assets. She'd finally looked at him then, her expression somewhere between concern and disappointment. We should talk about your 5-year plan. If we're going to build real wealth, we need to think strategically about your career trajectory. Daniel had felt the comment lodge somewhere in his chest, a small seed of doubt. Was she right? Should he be thinking differently about his career? Or was this the first hint that his success was being measured against standards he'd never agreed to? The second warning came during wedding planning. Lauren had wanted to get married at her family's estate in Greenwich, a sprawling property with manicured gardens and a ballroom that could accommodate 300 guests. Daniel had suggested something smaller, more intimate, perhaps in Chicago, where most of his friends and family were based. Daniel, we can't ask the Ashfords and their circle to fly to Chicago for a wedding, Lauren had said, as if the very idea was absurd. This is about bringing our families together, and practically speaking, my family's connections are more valuable to our future. Valuable how? Networking, business opportunities, social capital. These relationships matter. Your college friends are lovely, but they're not going to help us build the kind of life we want. The kind of life we want. Except Daniel had never articulated wanting a life that required constantly cultivating relationships with Connecticut billionaires. He'd wanted a partnership, a home, maybe kids someday, and work that challenged him. Apparently, that vision was insufficient, but he'd agreed to Greenwich, he'd agreed to the 300-person wedding, he'd agreed to the florist who charged more for centerpieces than Daniel's first car had cost. Because he loved Lauren, and he assumed that once they were married, once the performance of the wedding was over, they'd settle into the relationship he'd fallen in love with. Then came the engagement party. Lauren's parents had hosted it at their estate, a black-tie affair with champagne fountains and a jazz quartet. Daniel's parents had flown in from Ohio, his father uncomfortable in a rented tuxedo, his mother overwhelmed by the sheer scale of Ashford wealth. His sister, Emily, a high school teacher in Columbus, had whispered to him, "These people have a ballroom, an actual ballroom in their house." The evening had been going well until Richard Ashford pulled Daniel aside for a quick word in his study. The room was all dark wood and leather, walls lined with first editions and photographs of Richard shaking hands with senators and CEOs. "Daniel," Richard had said, pouring them both scotch from a crystal decanter, "I want to be direct with you. You seem like a decent young man, hard-working, respectful, but you need to understand something about Lauren." Daniel had accepted the scotch, waiting. She's been raised with certain expectations, certain standards. The lifestyle she's accustomed to requires significant resources to maintain. I'm not saying this to be cruel, but your current trajectory, project management, employee compensation, that's not going to be sufficient. "I'm aware there's a gap between our backgrounds," Daniel had said carefully. "But I'm building my career strategically. My income is solid and growing." Richard had smiled, but it hadn't reached his eyes. "I'm sure it seems solid to you. But Lauren's monthly expenses, clothing, beauty treatments, travel, social obligations, they exceed what you currently make annually. I'm not asking you to be something you're not. I'm simply making sure you understand the reality of what you're taking on." The number had hit Daniel like a punch to the gut. Lauren spent more in a month than he made in a year? How is that even possible? "I appreciate your candor," Daniel had managed. "Good. Because there's something else we need to discuss. A prenuptial agreement." Richard had pulled a leather portfolio from his desk drawer. "Standard protection for family assets. I'm sure you understand it's nothing personal." "Of course." "Excellent. We'll have it drawn up and ready for you to review a few days before the wedding. Keep things simple. Avoid any unnecessary drama." A few days before the wedding. Not months for negotiation and review, but days. Daniel had felt the manipulation clearly, but had kept his expression neutral. "I look forward to reviewing it." After that conversation, Daniel had started paying closer attention. He'd noticed how Lauren's spending had accelerated as the wedding approached. Designer purchases she'd shrug off as necessary for the wedding events. A $4,000 handbag because everyone will have their eyes on me. Weekend trips to New York for dress fittings that somehow always included $800 dinners and $300 spa treatments. When Daniel had gently suggested they should discuss a budget for their married life, Lauren had laughed. Budget? Daniel, we're not in college. People of our level don't operate on budgets. We make strategic investments in our lifestyle and image. Our level? Yes. You're about to marry into the Ashford family. That comes with expectations. You can't show up to events in off-the-rack suits and expect to be taken seriously. Daniel had been wearing an off-the-rack suit when she'd met him. She'd loved him in that suit. But that detail seemed to have been forgotten in favor of this new narrative where Daniel needed to be upgraded to Ashford standards. 2 weeks before the wedding, Tyler Chen had called Daniel. They'd been college roommates, had stood up at each other's weddings, still met for basketball every few weeks when schedules allowed. Tyler was now a named partner at Chen and Associates, specializing in high-net-worth divorces and prenuptial agreements. "I need to tell you something in confidence," Tyler had said. "Richard Ashford came to me 3 weeks ago. He wanted me to draft a prenuptial agreement for you and Lauren." Daniel had gone very still. "You're writing my prenup?" "I told him I couldn't. Conflict of interest, since you and I are close friends." He insisted, said you wouldn't know the difference, that you'd just sign whatever was put in front of you without really understanding it. Tyler's voice had been tight with anger. He specifically said, and I quote, "The boy's from Ohio. He'll be so grateful to marry up that he won't ask questions." The condescension had been breathtaking. "What did you do?" "I took the case, and I wrote a prenup that protects you while appearing to protect them." "Daniel, if you sign this document as written, you'll be in a better position than Lauren realizes. But there's something you need to know about the Ashford family finances." What Tyler revealed over the next 30 minutes had been illuminating. Richard Ashford's firm was indeed successful, but it was also leveraged to dangerous levels. The Ashford family's personal wealth was largely tied up in illiquid assets and trust structures. More importantly, Lauren herself had a trust fund from her maternal grandmother that Richard couldn't touch, $8.3 million that would be hers outright at 30, just 14 months away. If you marry her and she divorces you in the next 5 years under the prenup Richard wanted, you'd get nothing, not even a share of marital property. But the prenup I actually wrote? It looks protective of Ashford interests on the surface, but it has clauses that would entitle you to half of any assets either party brings into or accumulates during the marriage, including trust disbursements. If her grandmother's trust pays out while you're married, you'd be entitled to half in a divorce. Tyler, I'm not marrying her for money. I know that. But you should know what you're signing, and you should know that Richard Ashford specifically designed this prenup to leave you with nothing if the marriage fails. He's betting you're too unsophisticated to understand what you're signing. Daniel had sat with that information for 3 days before the dinner at Gibson's Steakhouse. 3 days of watching Lauren interact with him, looking for signs of the woman he'd fallen in love with, versus the woman who'd been subtly suggesting he wasn't quite enough for 18 months. And now, sitting across from her with Tyler's prenup in the leather portfolio, Daniel had a decision to make. Sign it and call their bluff, or refuse and see what happened when he finally pushed back. "So we're good," Lauren was saying, her attention already back on her phone. "You'll sign it tomorrow, we'll get it notarized, and then we can focus on the wedding." "Actually," Daniel said, "I'd like to have my attorney review it first." Lauren's head snapped up. "Your attorney? Daniel, you don't have an attorney." "Tyler Chen. You remember him from college. He specializes in family law." Something flickered across Lauren's face. "That seems unnecessary. It's a standard prenup, nothing complicated." "Then Tyler should be able to review it quickly. I'll have him look at it tomorrow. We can discuss any concerns, and I'll sign it Friday. That still gives us a day before the wedding." Lauren set down her phone, her expression hardening. "Daniel, my father is not going to appreciate you treating this like some kind of negotiation. This is a formality. You sign it or what?" She blinked, clearly not expecting him to finish the sentence. Or it sends a message that you don't trust my family, that you're already thinking about divorce before we're even married. Interesting, Daniel said quietly. Because I'd say requiring a prenup 3 days before the wedding sends a message that your family doesn't trust me, that they're already thinking about divorce before we're even married. That's different. How? Because, Lauren struggled, her face flushing. Because my family has assets to protect. And I don't have a reputation to protect? A career? A future? Lauren, I'm not refusing to sign. I'm asking to have an attorney review it. That's not just reasonable, it's standard practice. The fact that you're upset about it is concerning. Lauren stood abruptly, grabbing her purse. I need to call my father. She walked outside, leaving Daniel alone with 2 steaks that had just arrived and a leather portfolio containing 47 pages that would determine the next chapter of his life. He opened it, scanning the language Tyler had crafted. It was brilliant, technical enough to seem legitimate, protective enough on the surface to satisfy Richard Ashford, but with carefully worded clauses that would actually protect Daniel if things went wrong. The question was whether things would go wrong. Whether the woman outside calling her father was the woman he'd fallen for, just stressed by wedding planning, or whether that woman had never really existed at all. Lauren returned 10 minutes later, her expression composed. My father would like to meet with you tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock at the Union League Club. I'll be there, Daniel said. They finished their meal in near silence. The ease that had defined their early relationship was gone, replaced by something transactional and cold. As Daniel paid the check, Lauren had stopped reaching for the bill months ago. He wondered if she noticed the shift, if she cared. That night, Daniel sat in their living room long after Lauren had gone to bed, the prenup open on his lap. He thought about his parents, who'd built a modest but happy life on his father's salary as an electrician and his mother's work as a bookkeeper. He thought about how his mother had never once suggested his father wasn't enough, how they'd been partners in the truest sense, building something together rather than one person providing stability while the other took credit. He thought about Tyler's words. Richard Ashford is betting you're too unsophisticated to understand what you're signing, and Daniel realized something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't about the prenup anymore. It was about respect. It was about whether Lauren saw him as a partner or as a project, whether she loved who he was or was waiting for him to become someone else. Tomorrow's meeting with Richard Ashford would tell him everything he needed to know. The Union League Club occupied a limestone building in the Loop, all old money and older traditions. Daniel arrived at 8:50, wearing his best suit, off the rack from Men's Warehouse, something that would have embarrassed Lauren. He was shown to a private dining room where Richard Ashford sat reading the Wall Street Journal, a pot of coffee and 2 cups already on the table. Daniel, punctual, good. Richard folded his paper, gesturing to the opposite chair. Coffee? Thank you. Richard poured, his movements deliberate. Lauren tells me you want your attorney to review the prenup. That's causing some unnecessary concern. It's standard practice to have legal representation when signing a contract. This isn't a contract, it's a family agreement. It's 47 pages of legal language that determines the disposition of assets in the event of divorce. That's a contract. Richard's eyes narrowed slightly. You've read it then? I've skimmed it. Tyler will do a thorough review today. Tyler Chen, your college friend. Richard sipped his coffee. I actually approached Mr. Chen initially to draft this document. He declined, citing your friendship. I found that unprofessional. I find it ethical. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Richard set down his cup with careful precision. Let's be direct, Daniel. I like you. You're hardworking. You treat my daughter well. You're not some trust fund playboy looking for an easy life. But you need to understand your position here, which is, you're marrying significantly above your social and financial station. That's not a judgment, it's a fact. Lauren's lifestyle requires resources you don't currently possess and, candidly, may never possess. This prenup protects her from financial catastrophe if this marriage doesn't work out. And it leaves me with nothing. Richard smiled. It leaves you with exactly what you brought into the marriage, your salary, your savings, your career. Nothing about this agreement takes anything from you that's actually yours, except any claim to marital assets accumulated during the marriage, assets that will be accumulated primarily through Ashford family resources and connections. Yes. Daniel leaned back, studying Richard. The older man was confident, in control, clearly accustomed to getting his way. Here's what I don't understand. If you're so concerned about Lauren's financial security, why not encourage her to marry someone from your social circle? Someone with comparable wealth? Because Lauren wanted you. And I've learned that when Lauren wants something, it's easier to allow it and protect against downside risk than to fight her. The statement was revealing. Lauren was an asset to be managed, her choices to be tolerated and mitigated. Daniel wondered if she knew her father saw her that way. I'll have Tyler review the document today. If it's as straightforward as you say, I'll sign it tomorrow. We'll still have a day before the wedding. And if you have concerns, then we'll discuss them, like adults, like partners about to commit to building a life together. Richard's expression hardened. Don't mistake my daughter's affection for weakness, Daniel. If you push this, if you make demands or try to negotiate favorable terms, Lauren will know exactly what kind of man you really are. Someone who saw an opportunity and decided to capitalize on it. The projection was stunning. Richard was describing exactly what he himself was doing, seeing Daniel as an opportunity to manipulate and capitalizing on it, while accusing Daniel of the same. I'll be in touch after Tyler's review, Daniel said, standing. One more thing. Richard didn't stand. I hope you'll consider the bigger picture here. Lauren loves you in her way, but she's accustomed to a certain life. If you can't provide that life, if you can't adapt to what being an Ashford requires, then perhaps it's kinder to walk away now rather than waste her time. Daniel paused at the door. With respect, Mr. Ashford, Lauren isn't marrying your money. She's marrying me. If she's confused about that, if she thinks this marriage is about me providing a lifestyle rather than us building a partnership, then maybe we need to have a much different conversation than the one you're trying to force. He left before Richard could respond. Tyler met him at a coffee shop in Logan Square 2 hours later. The prenup spread across the table between them. This is wild, Tyler said, scanning the pages. Ashford had his attorneys review it. They approved it, and they have no idea what they actually approved. Explain it to me like I'm not a lawyer. Okay. On the surface, this protects all premarital assets from being divided in a divorce. Standard stuff. But here's the kicker. There's a clause on page 23 about assets acquired through familial distribution during the marriage. It's written in deliberately technical language. But what it actually says is that any money either party receives from family sources while married becomes marital property, subject to equal division. Including Lauren's trust fund, which pays out in 14 months, $8.3 million. If you're still married when she's 30, you'd be entitled to half in a divorce. Richard probably skimmed that clause and assumed it was protecting the Ashford family wealth from you. He didn't realize it actually protects you from being left with nothing. Daniel stared at the pages. This seems too good to be true. It gets better. There's also a clause about lifestyle maintenance that cuts both ways. If Lauren divorces you for any reason other than infidelity or abuse, she's required to maintain your standard of living for 3 years post-divorce. That means if you're living in a $1 million condo and driving a Mercedes because of her family's wealth, she has to keep funding that lifestyle for 3 years after the split. Why would Richard agree to that? Because it's written as protection against you seeking alimony. The language makes it look like it caps your claims, but in practice, it guarantees them. And because I know Richard's attorneys, they're corporate guys, not family law specialists. They saw technical language they assumed was sophisticated and approved it without really understanding the implications. Daniel absorbed this slowly. So if I sign this and the marriage fails within the next 5 years, you'd be in a significantly better position than if there was no prenup at all. Plus, because Richard rushed this process, because he deliberately waited until 3 days before the wedding to present it, any judge would look at this as coercion if Lauren tried to challenge it later. The timeline alone undermines the validity. Should I tell her? Tell her what this prenup actually says? Tyler was quiet for a moment. That's not a legal question. That's a relationship question. Do you trust her to hear it and respond fairly? Daniel thought about Lauren's transformation over 18 months. The woman who'd been excited by his work ethic now dismissed his career as insufficient. The woman who'd loved his Midwest values now seemed embarrassed by his background. The woman who'd wanted a partnership now expected him to provide a lifestyle. "I don't know," he admitted. "Then sign it. Get married. See what happens." "But Daniel, the prenup is just a legal document. It doesn't fix a broken relationship." If you're having doubts, if you're seeing red flags, a favorable prenup isn't a reason to ignore them. I know. But did he know? Or was he so invested in the version of Lauren he'd fallen for that he was willing to ignore the version she was becoming? That evening, Daniel returned to the River North condo to find Lauren pacing, phone in hand. "Where have you been?" "My father said your meeting ended hours ago." "Coffee with Tyler. He reviewed the prenup." "And?" "I'll sign it tomorrow." Relief flooded Lauren's face. "Oh, thank God. I was so worried you were going to make this difficult. Daddy will be so pleased." She came to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "This has all been so stressful. Once the wedding is over, everything will be better. We can finally just be us again." Daniel held her, smelling her expensive perfume, feeling the tension in her body. "Lauren, can I ask you something?" "Of course. When did I stop being enough?" She pulled back, confusion on her face. "What are you talking about? You're enough. You're everything." "Am I? Because for the last few months it feels like I've been failing some test I didn't know I was taking. Your father thinks I'm marrying above my station. Blake thinks I'm a project manager who got lucky. And sometimes, lately, it feels like you agree with them." "That's not true. I love you." "But do you love who I am? Or do you love who you think I could become?" Lauren's hesitation was barely perceptible, but Daniel caught it. A fraction of a second where she had to think about her answer. And in that fraction, Daniel saw everything he needed to see. "I love you," she repeated. "The real you. I'm stressed about the wedding, about combining our lives, about making sure we're set up for success. Once we're married, once all this pressure is off, you'll see. It'll be like it was in the beginning." But it wouldn't be. Daniel knew that now. The beginning had been the performance. This, the pressure, the expectations, the subtle suggestion that he wasn't quite sufficient, this was the reality. And the prenup Richard had so carefully orchestrated to protect his daughter from a fortune hunter was actually the document that would protect Daniel from making the biggest mistake of his life. "I'll sign it tomorrow," Daniel said again, "at the lawyer's office with Tyler present as my witness." "Why does Tyler need to be there?" "Because that's how you properly execute a legal contract, with both parties represented by counsel." Something flickered in Lauren's eyes, annoyance maybe, or calculation. But she nodded. "Fine. Whatever makes you comfortable, as long as it's signed before Friday." Thursday morning, Daniel, Lauren, Richard, and both legal teams met at Chen and Associates' office in the Loop. The conference room was all glass and modern furniture, nothing like the old money atmosphere of the Union League Club. Richard looked uncomfortable in the space, as if the newness of it offended him. "This is quite the production for a simple signing," Richard observed. "Just ensuring everything is done properly," Tyler said smoothly. "Daniel, if you'd like to review the document one more time before signing?" Daniel took his time, reading each page carefully while everyone watched. He saw the clauses Tyler had written, the careful language that appeared to protect Ashford interests while actually protecting his. He saw the timeline that made the entire document potentially invalid due to coercion. He saw the escape route Tyler had built for him, disguised as exactly what Richard Ashford thought he wanted. On page 47, Daniel signed his name. Lauren signed beside him. Both lawyers signed as witnesses. Richard signed as Lauren's representative, his expression satisfied. "Excellent," Richard said, standing. "Now we can all focus on the wedding and forget about this unpleasantness." "Just one thing," Daniel said, closing the leather portfolio. "I'd like a copy for my records." "Of course," Tyler said, already making copies. "Both parties should maintain copies of all signed agreements." Richard's satisfaction dimmed slightly. "That's not really necessary. We'll file it with the family attorneys." "And I'll keep my copy with mine," Daniel said. "Standard practice." There was nothing Richard could say to that. The document was signed, properly executed, witnessed by attorneys. The game was over, except Daniel was starting to realize the game was just beginning. That night, Lauren wanted to celebrate. They went to RPM Italian, one of her favorite spots, where she ordered a bottle of champagne that cost more than Daniel's weekly grocery budget. "We did it," she said, raising her glass. "All the hard stuff is over. Now it's just the wedding and then our life together." Daniel raised his glass, but he was thinking about Tyler's words. "The prenup doesn't fix a broken relationship." "Lauren, what do you want from our marriage?" She blinked, surprised by the question. "What do I want? I want what everyone wants. Love, partnership, building a life together." "What does that life look like? What do you mean? Specifically, where do we live? How do we spend our time? What are we building toward?" Lauren set down her champagne, a slight frown creasing her forehead. "We'll live in Greenwich eventually. Maybe keep the Chicago place for a few years, but ultimately, my family is in Connecticut. We'll travel, entertain, build our social network. I'll continue growing my role at Ashford Capital. You'll—" She trailed off. "I'll what?" "You'll figure out your path. Maybe consulting, maybe you'll start your own firm, something with more prestige than project management." There it was, the unspoken expectation that Daniel would become someone other than who he was, someone worthy of the Ashford name. "And if I like project management, if I'm good at it and want to keep doing it?" Lauren's frown deepened. "Daniel, we've talked about this. You're capable of so much more. You're settling for a comfortable corporate job when you could be building something significant." "Significant by whose definition?" "By anyone's definition. By mine." "Daniel, I'm not trying to change you. I'm trying to help you reach your potential." "What if this is my potential? What if I'm exactly who I'm meant to be, and that person is a project manager who likes solving complex logistical problems and mentoring junior team members? What if I don't want to be an entrepreneur or a consultant or whatever you've decided is acceptable?" Lauren stared at him, and for the first time, Daniel saw something like fear in her eyes. "Are you having second thoughts? About the wedding?" "I'm having questions about whether you love who I am or who you think I should become." "That's not fair. I love you." "Then love me, this me, not some future version you're trying to create." The silence that followed was heavy. Finally, Lauren said, "I think we should go home. We're both tired. The wedding is in 2 days. Let's get through the wedding and then we can talk about all of this." But Daniel knew they wouldn't. They'd get married, they'd go on their honeymoon to the Amalfi Coast, and when they came back, nothing would have changed except that they'd be legally bound to each other. And Daniel would have a prenup that protected him when it all fell apart. The wedding was everything Lauren had envisioned. 300 guests, a ceremony in the garden, a reception in the ballroom. Daniel's family looked overwhelmed by the scale of it all. His mother cried during the ceremony, but Daniel wasn't sure if it was from joy or worry. Blake gave a best man speech that included 3 jokes about Daniel marrying up and one about how Lauren was the real earner in this relationship. The guests laughed. Lauren laughed. Daniel smiled through gritted teeth. Richard's toast was more subtle but equally pointed. "To Daniel, who's joining our family, and all the opportunities that come with it, may he rise to meet them." The honeymoon in Italy was beautiful and strange. Lauren wanted to eat at Michelin-starred restaurants every night. Daniel wanted to explore local markets and cook in their villa. Lauren wanted to shop in boutiques in Positano. Daniel wanted to hike the path of the gods. They compromised by doing what Lauren wanted and calling it compromise. On their last night in Ravello, sitting on a terrace overlooking the sea, Lauren said, "I've been thinking about the next year. Daddy wants me to take over the Eastern Division of Ashford Capital. It would mean more travel, more client dinners, but also a significant increase in my equity stake. That sounds like a great opportunity. I knew you'd understand. The thing is, with my schedule getting more demanding, it would help if you could be more flexible, maybe talk to your company about remote work options or reduced hours." Daniel set down his wine. "Why would I do that? So you can handle more of the home responsibilities. I'll be traveling 3 or 4 days a week." Someone needs to manage the house, deal with maintenance, coordinate with staff when we hire them. Staff? Daniel, we can't maintain a proper home without help. I'm not going to be scrubbing toilets and doing laundry when I'm managing a $900 million portfolio. I wasn't suggesting you should. I was suggesting we handle our home together like most married couples. Most married couples don't have the kind of responsibilities we have. I have a full-time job, a job I'm good at and committed to. And I'm not asking you to quit, just to be more flexible. To support my career the way I'm supporting yours. How exactly are you supporting my career? Lauren's face flushed. By not asking you to move to Greenwich immediately. By letting you keep your project management job instead of pushing you to do something more ambitious. By being patient while you figure out your path. And there it was. The fundamental inequity laid bare. Lauren's career was sacred. Daniel's was something to be tolerated until he could be molded into something more acceptable. I don't need you to be patient with my career, Daniel said quietly. I need you to respect it. I do respect it. No, you don't. You see it as a placeholder until I become someone you can be proud of at dinner parties. That's not true, isn't it? Blake makes jokes about me being a project manager. Your father talks about opportunities I need to rise to. You keep suggesting I should do something more significant. None of you seem to understand that I like what I do, that I'm good at it, that it's not a stepping stone to something else. It's my career. Daniel, I'm not saying you're not good at it. I'm saying you're capable of more. By your definition, not mine. They didn't speak for the rest of dinner. The honeymoon ended with polite distance instead of newlywed bliss. Back in Chicago, the pattern established in Italy continued. Lauren's travel schedule was relentless. She'd be gone Monday through Thursday most weeks, home for long weekends that she spent catching up on work or having dinners with clients. Daniel maintained his schedule at work, came home to an empty condo and started wondering what exactly he'd signed up for. 3 months into the marriage, Daniel's company offered him a promotion, VP of Operations, a position that would put him on the executive team, reporting directly to the COO. It came with a substantial salary increase, equity options, and the kind of strategic responsibility he'd been working toward for years. He told Lauren over dinner at their condo, a rare night when they were both home and not exhausted. That's wonderful, she said, the words automatic. What's the travel requirement? Minimal. Quarterly trips to the LA office, occasional client sites, but mostly Chicago-based. Equity options? About 50,000 shares, vesting over 4 years. Lauren was quiet, calculating. That's decent. Not transformational, but decent. She paused. Have you thought about using this as leverage to negotiate an exit package? Take the title, build your resume, then leave in a year to start your own firm. Why would I do that? Because ownership is how you build real wealth, Daniel. You keep letting other people profit from your expertise. Or I keep building a career I enjoy at a company I respect. At 32, you should be thinking bigger than enjoying your job. You should be thinking about legacy. Daniel set down his fork. Legacy for who? For us. For our future. Daniel, we can't build the kind of life I want on a VP salary. You mean the kind of life your father wants? That's not fair, isn't it? Lauren, you have your trust fund. You'll have $8.3 million in 10 months. We don't need me to be an entrepreneur or a CEO. We're financially secure. Lauren's expression shifted, something cold entering her eyes. How do you know about my trust fund? Daniel realized his mistake too late. You mentioned it. No, I didn't. I specifically didn't mention it because I didn't want you thinking about my family money. Tyler told me, when he was explaining the prenup. Tyler told you. Lauren stood, her hand shaking. You and your lawyer friend were discussing my private financial information. It's relevant to the prenup, to what assets would be protected in a divorce. In a divorce? We've been married 3 months and you're already thinking about divorce? That's not what I meant. Lauren, the prenup your father insisted on is protecting my family from exactly this, from you calculating what you could take from me. The accusation was so backwards, so perfectly opposite of reality, that Daniel almost laughed. I'm not calculating anything. I took a job I love. I'm building a career I respect. I'm trying to be a partner to you. But you keep moving the goalposts. Nothing I do is ever quite enough. Because you keep settling. You keep accepting comfortable instead of pushing for exceptional. Do you know what Blake said last week? He said, "How's your project manager husband? Still managing projects?" And I had to stand there and defend your choices to my own brother. Then maybe stop defending me and start defending our marriage. Tell Blake that who I am is exactly who you married, that my career isn't an embarrassment, it's something you're proud of. I am proud of you. No, you're not. You're embarrassed, and you're trying to fix that embarrassment by turning me into someone I'm not. Lauren grabbed her purse. I'm staying at a hotel tonight. We both need space to think. About what? About whether this marriage is what either of us thought it would be. She left. Daniel sat in their empty condo, surrounded by furniture that cost more than he made in 3 months, and wondered how he'd ended up here. How 18 months ago he'd been happy with a woman who seemed to love him, and now he was married to a woman who seemed to resent him. His phone rang. Tyler. "I heard from the Ashford family attorneys today," Tyler said without preamble. "They're challenging the prenup." "On what grounds?" "They're claiming you had undue influence over Lauren during the signing, that because I'm your friend, the representation wasn't neutral." "That's insane. Richard is the one who rushed the timeline. He's the one who presented it 3 days before the wedding." "I know, and any judge will see that. But Daniel, they're not actually trying to invalidate the prenup. They're sending a message. They're reminding you that they have lawyers and resources and they're not afraid to use them. For what purpose? To keep you in your place, to make sure you don't get comfortable in this marriage or start thinking you're entitled to anything. Richard Ashford is a bully, and this is how bullies operate." Daniel thought about the last 3 months, about Lauren's criticism disguised as encouragement, about the constant suggestion that he should be more ambitious, more entrepreneurial, more everything except what he was, about how exhausting it was to be married to someone who saw him as a project to be managed rather than a partner to be loved. "Tyler, what happens if I want out?" Silence. Then, "The prenup I wrote protects you. But are you sure? It's only been 3 months. 3 months of knowing I made a mistake. Of seeing clearly that Lauren doesn't love who I am. She loves who she thinks she can turn me into. Then you need to document everything. Keep records of conversations, save texts and emails, maintain a paper trail. Because if you're going to end this, you need to be strategic about it." "How did I become someone who needs to be strategic about ending my marriage?" "You became someone who married into a family that sees relationships as transactions." "I'm sorry, Daniel. I really am." That night, Daniel started keeping notes. Not for legal protection, but because he needed to understand what had happened, how he'd gone from confident and happy to questioning himself constantly, how love had turned into something that felt like judgment. Lauren came home the next evening, calm and composed. "I've been thinking," she said. "Maybe I've been pushing too hard. You're right that you should do what makes you happy. If that's project management, then that's fine." "Is it?" "Of course. I love you, Daniel. We're just adjusting to married life. Every couple goes through this." But her words felt hollow, performed, and Daniel realized something crucial. Lauren had decided he was acceptable as long as he stayed in his lane, as long as he didn't expect her respect or admiration, as long as he provided stability while she built her empire. He could keep being a project manager. He could be tolerated. "I took the VP position," Daniel said. "I start in 2 weeks. "Congratulations." The word was automatic, without warmth. "I also told them I'm not interested in starting my own firm. This is the path I want." Lauren's smile tightened. "Then I'm happy for you." But she wasn't. And in that moment, Daniel knew with complete clarity that this marriage had an expiration date. The only question was when. Lauren's 30th birthday fell on a Tuesday in October, 8 months into their marriage. The trust fund from her grandmother paid out exactly as scheduled, $8.3 million deposited into an account Lauren had opened without telling Daniel. He found out by accident, coming home early from work to find Lauren on the phone with her financial advisor discussing investment strategies for the grandmother distribution. She ended the call when she saw him, her expression guilty. "I was going to tell you." "When?" "Soon. I wanted to set up the accounts first, figure out the strategy." "This is marital property, Lauren, under the prenup." Her face hardened. "It's my money, from my family. It has nothing to do with you." "The prenup your father wrote says otherwise. The prenup protects family assets. Read page 23. Assets acquired through familial distribution during the marriage become marital property. Tyler made sure of that. Lauren stared at him, and Daniel watched her do the math. Watched her realize that the prenup meant to protect her from him actually did the opposite. Watched the moment she understood she'd been outplayed. "You knew," she said quietly. "When you signed it, you knew what it said. I had it reviewed by an attorney, like any reasonable person would. You manipulated us. You let my father think he was protecting me when really I was protecting myself from exactly what you're doing right now. Treating marriage like a business transaction where everything that's yours stays yours and everything that's mine is negotiable. That money is mine. That money was distributed to you while we're married. That makes it ours, just like my salary is ours, just like the equity from my new position is ours. That's what marriage means, Lauren. Partnership, equal sharing." She sank onto the couch, her face pale. "This can't be happening." "It is happening, because your father tried to manipulate me, assumed I was too unsophisticated to understand a legal document, and got his comeuppance. And you're realizing right now that you married someone you fundamentally don't respect, and now that person has claim to your inheritance. I do respect you. No, you don't. You never have. From the moment we got engaged, you've been trying to turn me into someone you could be proud of at dinner parties, someone worthy of the Ashford name. But I'm not going to become that person, Lauren. I'm going to keep being exactly who I am." "Then what do you want? A divorce? Half my money?" Daniel sat down across from her, suddenly exhausted. "I want you to be honest about what this marriage really is, about whether you ever loved me or whether I was just a rebellion against your father that you decided to make work." Lauren was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. "I did love you. At first. You were so different from everyone in my world, so genuine and hard-working and real. But then we got engaged, and my family started asking questions, and I started seeing you through their eyes. And I couldn't—" She stopped. "Couldn't what?" "Couldn't defend you without feeling like I was defending a choice I wasn't sure about anymore. Blake's jokes about you being a project manager. My father's comments about you not understanding our world. My mother asking if you'd ever be able to provide the lifestyle I was accustomed to. Every comment made me question whether I'd made a mistake. So you decided to fix me instead of telling them to back off. I thought if you just reached your potential, if you became more ambitious, then you wouldn't be embarrassed to be married to me." Lauren's silence was answer enough. Daniel stood, a strange calm settling over him. "I want a divorce. Daniel, I want a divorce," he repeated. "Because I deserve to be with someone who loves me as I am, who doesn't see my career as something to apologize for or my ambitions as insufficient. And you deserve to be with someone from your world who meets your father's standards. If we divorce, you get half the trust fund." "I know. So that's what this was about? The prenup, the marriage, all of it. You were after my money?" Daniel laughed, the sound bitter. "That's what you need to believe, isn't it? That I'm the villain, that I manipulated you. It's easier than admitting you spent 18 months trying to turn me into someone I'm not and then got upset when I refused to comply. I never tried to change you. You tried to change everything about me except my DNA, Lauren. My career, my ambitions, my values, my perspective on what matters in life. You wanted to keep my face and personality while replacing everything that makes me who I am. That's not love. That's a home renovation project." Lauren's eyes filled with tears. "I don't want a divorce." "Why not? You're clearly not happy." "Because," she struggled, searching for words, "because I don't want to admit failure. Because my family will say they were right about you. Because a divorce this fast looks bad. Notice what you didn't say. You didn't say because you love me." She looked away. "I'll file tomorrow," Daniel said. "You can explain it to your family however you want. Gold digger husband, manipulative project manager, whatever narrative makes you feel better. But Lauren, do me one favor." "What?" "Tell the truth, at least to yourself. Admit that you married someone you thought you could change. And when that didn't work, when I insisted on being myself, you realized you'd made a mistake. That's not villainy on either side. It's just two people who wanted different things." Lauren nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry." "Me too." Daniel stood in his new office at Midwest Logistics Solutions, late afternoon sun streaming through windows that overlooked the Chicago River. As VP of Operations, he oversaw a team of 60 people across 3 states. The work was challenging, complex, exactly what he'd wanted. The equity options he'd received were worth twice what they'd been valued at when he started. He was respected, successful, building something meaningful. The divorce had been finalized 6 months ago. As Tyler had predicted, the prenup held up perfectly. Daniel received half of Lauren's trust fund, $4.15 million, and walked away with no debt, no drama, and a clear conscience. He'd invested most of it conservatively, bought a condo in Wicker Park, and donated a significant portion to a scholarship fund for first-generation college students. Lauren had been furious during the proceedings, but ultimately there was nothing she could do. Her father's attempt to manipulate Daniel had backfired spectacularly. The timeline of the prenup presentation, the rushed signing, Tyler's careful documentation, all of it made challenging the agreement impossible. Richard Ashford had tried one last power play, threatening to damage Daniel's reputation in Chicago business circles. Tyler had responded with a single letter outlining the facts. Richard had deliberately attempted to defraud Daniel through a prenup designed to leave him with nothing while using Daniel's friend's professional credentials to create false trust. If Richard wanted to make that story public, Tyler would be happy to provide documentation. The threat stopped. Daniel had heard through mutual acquaintances that Lauren was dating a private equity manager from Greenwich, someone from the right families with the right pedigree, someone who fit the Ashford vision. He hoped they'd be happy together. His phone buzzed. A text from Emma, the structural engineer he'd been dating for 3 months. She was brilliant, funny, and completely unimpressed by pretense of any kind. Their second date had been to a hot dog stand, followed by an architecture boat tour. She'd thought it was perfect. Still on for tonight? My place, 7 p.m. I'm making that pasta you liked. Daniel smiled, typing back. Can't wait. Should I bring wine? Only if it costs less than $20. We're not trying to impress anyone here. That was the thing about Emma. She liked who he was. She respected his work. When he talked about solving a complex logistics problem, she listened with genuine interest. When he told her about his childhood in Ohio, she asked questions instead of making assumptions. She was building a career she loved in structural engineering, and she understood what it meant to be passionate about technical work that most people didn't understand or appreciate. They weren't trying to impress anyone, they were just building something real. Daniel's phone rang. His mother calling from Ohio for their weekly check-in. "How's my favorite VP?" she asked, warmth in her voice. "Good, Mom. Really good." "And that nice engineer girl, Emma?" "I'm seeing her tonight." "Good. She sounds lovely. Your father wants to know if she likes fishing, because if you bring her home this summer, he wants to take her out on the boat." Daniel laughed. His parents had never understood Lauren's world of country clubs and formal dinners. But Emma, who'd grown up in Wisconsin and learned to fix engines from her dad, they understood perfectly. "I'll ask her." "You do that. And Daniel? Your father and I are proud of you, not because of your fancy job or your office with a view, because you stood up for yourself, because you refused to become someone you're not just to make other people comfortable." "Thanks, Mom." After they hung up, Daniel stood at his window, watching the city lights begin to flicker on as evening settled over Chicago. He thought about the prenup that had saved him, about Tyler's friendship and foresight, about the bullet he'd dodged by marrying someone who revealed her true nature early rather than years down the line. True strength isn't about becoming what others expect you to be. It's about knowing who you are and refusing to apologize for it, even when the world tells you it's not enough. Partnership isn't about one person elevating the other to acceptable standards. It's about 2 people who respect each other exactly as they are, building something together that celebrates their authentic selves. And sometimes, the best prenup isn't the one that protects your assets. It's the one that protects your self-respect. The one that makes sure when you walk away from something that wasn't right, you walk away whole. What would you have done in Daniel's position? Would you have signed the prenup? Would you have stayed in the marriage hoping things would improve? Or would you have trusted yourself enough to walk away? If this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, you don't need to change to be worthy of love. You need to find someone who sees your worth exactly as you are. Your move, world.